John T had become one of the most recognizable faces in the world of British reality television through his appearance in Salvage Hunters. It premiered in 2011 on the Warner Bros. Discovery-operated British and Irish-free TV channel Quest. The show was all about Drew Pritchard's search for hidden treasures across the country and reselling items online in his Conwy shop. John accompanied Drew on his travels as he drove his vehicle and helped load the items brought. The reality series Salvage Hunters chronicled how Drew Pritchard's antique shop operated, the main focus being on the salvaging part. The main headquarters was based in Conwy, North Wales, where his wife Rebecca helped him run the business. He would go on scavenging hunts accompanied by one of his employees at first, and then John T when he became part of the show. Rebecca and a team of restorers would be waiting to check out his latest acquisitions after they were unloaded from the van. The items would then be sorted, cleaned, and restored if needed before they were photographed and posted for sale on their website with a brief description. Sometimes they would inform viewers if those items were sold and where they ended up. Drew Pritchard was touted as one of the leading British decorative salvage dealers. He traveled across the country to look at and unearth unusual, wonderful, and classic pieces. It was said that there was no place he wouldn't go and nothing he wouldn't consider in his search. He still regarded salvaging as a risky business as things didn't always go as planned. Based on his years of experience, he'd been dealing independently since 1993. Just finding the place where he would go and look took a lot of time and effort. However, he could never be sure that he'd got the right piece until he actually went there and checked it out. Not all the trips were successful. Some were a bust when nothing at the destination interested him. His interest in salvaging began when he was around 8 years old, and he pursued tips from locals on items that people threw away, such as car badges and push bikes. He remembered touring barnyards in the North Wales valleys with his father in their minivan, looking for vintage motorcycle parts, and ended up getting things that he wanted for himself, which he mostly kept in tin boxes in his bedroom. There is this saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and Drew knew this to be true because many items that were considered rubbish by some, just because they were old, dusty, neglected, or simply unwanted, were some of his best finds. He visited fairs and antique shops in far-flung places as well as castles and manor houses, but more often than not, he ended up rummaging through piles and piles of junk long forgotten by their owners in dark, musty or dirty barns and storage areas. Many were curious about how he chose the pieces he would buy. For him, it was as simple as picking the ones he liked, and what he believed his customers or other collectors would want. It was a business after all. When checking out the pieces, he put his focus on originality, design, quality, rarity, and how relatively untouched they were. Surprisingly, for an antique dealer, his preference wasn't limited to items from the 17th century, as he unabashedly procured items up to the 21st century as well. He loved mixing them up and enjoyed how everything looked good together. Some items needed only cleaning before they were put on sale, but most items needed restoring or repairing. Not everything he acquired turned out to be gems. There were times when after the item was cleaned up, he discovered it wasn't really that old or that special. However, he knew how to get his money back, as he would sell them even if his profit was only $1, or actually £1. Business was brisk with hundreds of pieces of merchandise sold over the course of a few weeks, so it was time to stock up. Drew, along with Julian, who worked in deliveries and restoration, went to Drumlanrig Castle, the ancestral home of the Duke of Buccleuch, set within a 90,000-acre country estate, one of the biggest in the UK, where Drew met with Richard Riley, the head ranger of the estate. Although the place had incredible furniture and great artworks including a Rembrandt painting, what Drew was mostly interested in could be found outside the castle, as he was looking for some old country house magic. Richard took them to the storage area where Drew found and bought a pair of large Georgian plate racks and 3 hay racks. The two headed back up to their headquarters where the items would be transferred from junk to saleable. For the plate racks, he sold them to another antique dealer. There was a bit of haggling, but he ended up agreeing to the price his customer wanted. Drew said that he loved it when the things were sold quickly, sharing that sometimes it wasn't about the money, as what made it more fun was knowing where the item went. especially if it was to a regular customer or someone he respected. John, fondly called by his last name, T, was introduced as Drew's sidekick or assistant in the second season premiere of the show, aired in 2012. He was Drew's childhood friend who Drew recalled spending summers with, combing the estuary for boat equipment such as oars, which they would sell on the side of the road by his house. He said that this was actually the first time he made money out of things that people discarded. Not much was known about how their friendship had grown, but T shared that he previously worked on and off with Drew, delivering and picking up. In the show, the two went on salvaging trips together, which made Drew's wife happy, because she knew that if her husband needed cheering up, T would be the right person for that. It was clear from the start how much fun the two had, no matter how long they were on the road, partly because of T's sense of humor. The two guys' first trip in the show was a 5-hour drive from Conwy to the village of Athelstaneford in East Lothian, Scotland, and Glimmerton House, where they met with Sir David Kinloch, 13th Baronet, who was also a salvage dealer. Sir David felt that he had pieces worth saving, such as a 19th century kitchen table made of pine, and hoped it would find a new home because he couldn't do anything more with it. Drew inspected the table and pointed out what was wrong with it so that he could buy it at a price that would later give him a tidy profit. There was some damage to the surface, but Drew still ended up buying it. He also got a great deal on a mid-19th century kitchen prep table, as he already had a potential buyer for it. He didn't have a hard time purchasing the items because Sir David was glad that they would be saved. Before they left, they also acquired emergency telephone boxes that came from old munitions factories, which were a direct link to the fire brigade. Transformed into birdhouses, they could fetch a good price. The two went on a 2-hour drive to reach Preston, Lancashire, where they met Eddie Whiteside, who'd constructed his home out of recycled materials. His yard was a treasure trove for scavengers. As Eddie's collection spanned more than 3 decades, he'd done restoration work, but later decided to leave things as they were. T and Drew began their search for something that the latter could sell in his shop, and spotted a cast iron clock that was used to synchronize every clock at a factory, and would be great as a decorative piece in a bar or restaurant. Other items that Drew bought included big concave mirrors used in searchlights by the Royal Navy since the mid-19th century, a pair of mid-century industrial lamps that were larger than average, and well-made white ornate terracotta columns. Drew was always on the lookout for lighting fixtures, chairs, signage, and clocks because they sold well. From time to time, however, he would find weird and interesting things in his scavenger hunts, which he just couldn't pass on the chance to acquire. With T driving the van, they went to Oswestry, a historic railway town in Shropshire, close to the Welsh border. They met with Andy Jennings, who was known for preserving pieces of history and for specializing in upcycling. What caught their attention the most, however, was a late 19th century chicken coop with cast iron wheels, which Drew said was his favorite purchase that year, saying that it made him giggle. After they modified it back at his shop, it sold pretty quickly. Interestingly, their next finds came when they went to a village of Llandinam in Montgomery Shire in central Wales. Mid-20th century ceramic chicken eggs or nest eggs used to encourage a hen to lay more eggs. Earlier versions of these were made from wood or glass. T and Drew traveled to Tenbury Wells in Worcestershire to see Adrian Munday, who ran an antique business from an old coach house beside the Georgian Manor house on the Burford estate. They found something quite rare, nothing Drew had ever seen in books, fairs, or salvage yards: a valvatron, a radio valve advertising an articulated figure from the 1930s with a well-defined face and multicolored wooden body. It was in a good, unrestored condition, but was missing a hand. The two guys headed to Llangollen, a small town in Denbighshire, Wales, to meet with a young antique dealer. As they entered the shop, Drew's eyes were immediately drawn to an early 20th century tramp art box. The woodworking style used was popular between the 1870s and 1940s, in which small pieces of wood from discarded shipping crates or cigar boxes were whittled using a pocket knife into layers of geometric patterns. It was in superb condition, and what made it unusual was that it was painted. It was quickly sold to an American dealer. A trip to Bateman's Brewery in Wainfleet, Lincolnshire proved to be a great one, as T and Drew found lots of interesting things in the cellar and storage areas. This wasn't surprising, considering that the brewery had been founded in 1874 and remained in the family since then. It seemed that nothing had been thrown away, and some items were real collectibles that Drew ended up buying, including an enamel British rail sign, wooden beer crates from the late 1800s, and bronze metal letters made in the 1960s. However, what excited the expert dealer the most were the ovaloid-shaped bar kegs with their original spigots. 3 of them had a painting of a swan on the front. Drew hadn't seen these late 19th century ceramic decorative bar kegs before, as they were so rare and quite valuable. Unfortunately, the owners had an emotional attachment to them, so Drew didn't push them into selling the items. In Haywards Heath, a town in West Sussex, said to be named after a highwayman, T and Drew found something unexpected. Andrew John Stevenson Clark and his family lived at the Board Hill Garden, built in Elizabethan times. Drew's eyes were drawn to an ornate piece of furniture that was a gift to Andrew's great-great-grandfather by the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, who was assassinated in Sarajevo and which triggered a series of events leading to World War I. Naturally, the particular furniture wasn't for sale. However, Drew and T didn't go home empty-handed, as they rummaged through the barns and found a child's twin rocker from the 1930s and was a cross between a seesaw and a rocking chair, plus a wrought iron table lamp and wooden library steps made from birch with mahogany trim. There was a sense of authenticity to how T and Drew scoured junkyards and country estates. What made the show quite fascinating was that one never knew what the two could find. The salvage dealer said that sometimes gems were regarded as junk when they became unwanted or were handed over to someone who didn't understand their value. That it would become valuable again only when it was discovered by someone who knew its worth. Often, just when viewers thought their trip was a bust, they would end up bringing back rare treasures. Drew acquired a reputation for scouring weird and unique items, so it wasn't surprising that the show became a huge hit and spawned several spin-off series including Salvage Hunter Best Buys, Salvage Hunter Classic Cars, Salvage Hunters Bite Size, and Salvage Hunters Best Restorations. T kept a low profile whenever he and Drew were on a scavenging hunt, as the latter talked business with owners and other dealers, but was ready to help when needed. When they were on the road, however, he was back to his old self, making his friend laugh. Not much was known about him, as he never really talked about his personal life. Fans who had been watching Salvage Hunters noticed that T had a bit of a weight problem and were amazed by his weight loss transformation over the years. However, it seemed that he'd recently regained the weight. Another thing that viewers noticed from the latest season of the show, as well as from photos posted on Instagram said to be managed by the production team, was that he was sporting a beard. His fans were quick to comment that he looked like Hagrid, the half-giant wizard from the Harry Potter series. T was still part of the Quest reality show as it aired its 16th season in 2022. It appeared that the series remained in strong demand despite the scandals involving its main star. Apparently, in 2015, Drew had an extramarital affair with Amanda, a married woman, and he was punched in the head by her husband, Janus Thomas, just outside the Liverpool Arms pub in 2017. The businessman believed he was provoked by Drew, who smirked at him, and so he felt belittled. As for Drew, he and his wife divorced in 2017, allegedly because of his infidelity, but Rebecca remained his business partner. It was reported that the Drew Pritchard antique store, which he opened in 2017 on Conwy High Street, closed down in 2022, Drew saying that he would relocate to new pastures. Those who are interested in getting their hands on his best finds may continue to do so through his online store. Meanwhile, fans just have to watch old episodes or wait for the next season of the show to air to see Drew and John T. Thank you for spending some time with us. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another video. We also handpicked these videos which we recommend you watch next. You can talk to us on all social medias or ask a question in the comments below. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you back tomorrow.